let's get some headlines, some football. We'll talk a little football around the state. Not a ton to talk about. There were a number of games that were canceled, college football games. Remember, there's actually still college football because even though we're having the weather thing, just remember that whenever we get done with the weather, all we gotta do is deal with the pandemic. So that's good.
It's cool.
So there were a number of games that got canceled. I want to say a lot of the D3 games got canceled last week
Mm-hmm.
for college football across the state of Texas. But one game that did happen that I think had a lot of people's attention. It was Saturday night, as the weather was really getting cold in Stephenville. Tarleton played their first ever Division One football game. If you remember, they were making the move from the Lone Star Conference up to Division One. They were playing as an FCS independent this year, and then next year they will be joining the WAC. And by next year I mean next season, which will be in the fall. It's a whole thing. But they had their first ever Division One game on Saturday, and I'll be honest.
Mm-hmm.
The early part of this did not look good. They're
Mm-mm.
playing McNeese State, and McNeese State jumped out to a 10-0 lead. By the way, the head coach of McNeese State is Frank Wilson,
Yep, old
former
UTSA.
UTSA head coach. So McNeese State jumps out to a 10-0 lead, and I'll be honest, I was like, well, there is a large gap between Division Two and Division One, and I wonder if Tarleton is realizing that. But instead, they made this really fantastic, comeback and really took control of this game after that. Braylon Bridges, their running back, was fantastic in this game. They were really rock solid throughout the course of this game, and I would say the word, and you can read a nice recap of it from our own Corey Hogue on TexasFootball.com. I would say that it was like a surprising level of play from Todd Witten's company or Todd
Mm-hmm.
Witten's squad. This was a team that that ended up getting taken. They took McNeese ended up coming back from a 14-point deficit late in the fourth quarter and beat them in double overtime. And look, I'm not here to tell you that that Tarleton rather should be pleased with moral victories, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's what they want to do. But I will say, I know they exceeded my expectations in their
Mm-hmm.
first Division One game. I think that is a pretty common thought
Mm-hmm.
among college football people is, okay, Tarleton State, like you made that leap and you didn't go out there and look overmatched.
Mm-hmm.
You went out there and ended up, taking what's a decent McNeese State team, and ended up going to double overtime with them. Yeah, there's a lot to like. There's a lot to
And
like. I think, again, obviously you'd like to come away with a W, but in lieu of a W, I think that this was a really, really nice result there for Tarleton.
I was fixing to say too, not only first Division One game in February in cold weather during a global pandemic, I feel like that adds a little more to that first Division One, plate that you have there.
Mm-hmm.
And they went out there and they did the thing.
Yeah, I thought that was really fantastic, and I thought that there's a lot of positives to take from it. Obviously you want to put it in the left hand column, but because you couldn't do that. But I think that this was a really important first step for Tarleton, and I think a sign of really good things to come. That
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to walk into Division One and suddenly just be
Just lay down.
this cellar dweller right from the beginning. So I thought there's a lot to like there. What happened last Saturday in Stephenville. Speaking of college football, news that came down yesterday was that the NCAA has extended the recruiting dead period for all sports through May 31st.
May.
So
Yeah.
May 31st. It's the end of May. So that means that I want to say the last time that you were able to have in-person recruiting, boy howdy. I mean, it's going to go more than a year. And obviously, that's one thing that we dived into with Greg Powers, our recruiting analyst, is the impact of not having in-person recruiting on the kind of recruiting world, but there will be no in-person recruiting through the end of May. And that is certainly noteworthy. As we kind of gear up, we close the book on the class of 2021. We gear up for the class of 2022. They are going to have a truncated timetable as well, as the dead period will extend it through May 31st. That's been in place since the coronavirus pandemic began last March. So there you go. All right. I want to direct you to a story on ESPN.com. Dave Wilson has written a story that I think is really good about SMU's recruiting and their focus on the DFW area. And it focuses a lot on Rashad Samples, who, of course, we know as kind of being their receivers coach and kind of their ace recruiter, kind of dives into his story and how it ties into what SMU was able to do and how they've kind of changed the culture there of recruiting, kind of hyper local recruiting. A lot of it comes back to the fact that when Rashad Samples was at Skyline as playing for his dad, that he felt like he should have been a priority for SMU. That basically he said that SMU assumed he wouldn't want to play there and didn't pursue him. Now, he was a 4-star guy. He had offers from Ohio State, from Texas, from A&M, from Notre Dame, and stuff like that. But he kind of felt that it was a mistake for them not to focus on him. And that goes back to the June Jones era. And June Jones is, I think, a relatively controversial figure for his time there at SMU. It's a really good read about how kind of Rashad Samples has helped to transform Sonny Dykes' staff and what they've been able to do. Of course, we had Coach Dykes on last week and talked with him, but I think this is a great follow-up if you kind of want to dig more into it. But it's by Dave Wilson up on ESPN.com. It's called, the headline is Led by Star Recruiter Rashad Samples, SMU is a destination on the rise. So make sure you check that out on ESPN.com. Finally, speaking of coaching moves. So last week, we talked about our friend Marco Regalado, the Northwest Eaton assistant coach who was leaving to take a job on the staff as a recruiting analyst, more or less, at Washington State, going from Texas high school assistant coach to P5 college football staff. Pretty big leap. Let's talk about another leap, okay? And this came down earlier this week that Houston Strake Jesuit is looking for a head coach. Because Clay Kubiak is leaving. Clay Kubiak is leaving there. He was there for 3 years. They went 24-11. Strake, of course, made. I want to say they ran to the regional semifinals back in 2019. They were the team that beat Beaumont Westbrook in 2019. That was kind of sent some shockwaves through there. But Clay Kubiak is leaving Houston Strake Jesuit to join the staff of the San Francisco 49ers. He is making the leap from Texas high school football coach to NFL. He's going to be a defensive quality control analyst for the San Francisco 49ers. There is a tie here. You may recognize the last name, Kubiak. His dad is Gary Kubiak. Gary Kubiak was the head coach in Houston when Kyle Shanahan, who's now the head coach at these 49ers, was his wide receivers coach. So there is a connection between the Shanahan family and the Kubiak family. And so they have drawn in Clay Kubiak to be a defensive quality control analyst for the San Francisco 49ers. So congratulations to Coach Kubiak. And Houston Strake Jesuit is now open. So
I was surprised when I saw that one. I thought I read it wrong.
Yeah, you don't see that a lot. You don't see a lot of. I mean, there are obviously guys who have coached in the high school ranks that have gone on to coach in the NFL, right? That has happened. But to go straight from Texas high school football coach to NFL staff is pretty rare. So congratulations to Coach Clay Kubiak as he is heading off to San Francisco. And those are some headlines. Of course, you can find complete coverage of Texas high school football and Texas college football at texasfootball.com.